so excited to have this conversation with you. I think that from my perspective and what I really hope I can share with students at UT is that entrepreneurship is a journey, and in that journey, who you are and what you bring to the table, including your multiple identities and your story, helps shape and define the work that you produce in the world as well. And so given everything, especially with everything that's going on in the world today, I really wanted to talk to you about this theme of resilience and how for you, entrepreneurship and your multiple identities intersect. So I really want to start off by, just having you give a quick introduction about yourself, and what you're looking forward to in this conversation. I can do the same, and then we can just hop into it.
Okay. My name is Dara Chike-Obi. I am the CEO and co-founder of NwaBebé. Before that, I was a 10-year attorney working in the oil and gas industry. I am mom to an amazing 4-year-old son and wife to a brilliant physician here in town. And I love what you said, because everything I did up until this point has defined who I am as an entrepreneur and has given me the tools to kind of confront it head on, with the confidence of knowing who I am and what I bring to the table. So, I mean, spot on what you were saying, just growth, never ending growth and evolution should be the goal.
Yeah, thank you. And for those who don't know a little bit more about my background, I was born in Vietnam, moved to Houston. I was young, grew up there, went to UT Austin. So I am an alumna, similar to you. Did the most in my undergrad years, double majoring in French language and literature, as well as advertising, the Moody College Communications. I did the Bridging Disciplines program, Innovation, Creativity, Entrepreneurship. Portuguese minor, all the things. And then my journey also around entrepreneurship was also very winding. So working for another startup, launching my own event production company, focused on serving creatives of color called Collective Blue, launching another one specifically focused on Asian American women entrepreneurship in the arts called Misfits Production. Fashion photographer, creative director, and then just landed in this position, and doing a lot of the work I did in my undergrad, but getting paid to do it, and getting to affect a lot more change. So super excited to have this conversation with you. So I think something that's always helpful for these big topics is just starting off with the basic definitions, right? So what does being an entrepreneur mean to you, Dara?
Being an entrepreneur to me means owning your own successes and failures and putting forth the things that you find valuable in the world, out to the world. Like I said, I worked in the oil and gas industry. Like you, I grew up in Houston. I did law school at University of Texas. So it just kind of seemed like that was the way to go. But after having my son, I started to rethink the amounts of energy that I was putting forth towards something that I didn't necessarily believe in. And entrepreneurship was the way for me to really express myself and not feel boxed into what people think I should be doing.
Yeah, it sounds like for you, entrepreneurship has been this vehicle that helps you get closer to doing and being who you want to be. So that ties into identity. Like, what does the word identity mean to you, and what are your multiple identities that you consider yourself?
What does identity mean to me? I think identity is the core and the foundation of who you are. I don't necessarily consider myself as having multiple identities. I identify by my name. My first name is Dara, and that is Yoruba for God has given me many gifts. My middle name is Beatrice, and it is a reference to my paternal grandmother who passed when my father was very young. And my maiden name was Magnus Lawson, and Magnus Lawson refers to one of the 5 princes from my family's origin in Togoland, and descendants of Magnus, one of the princes, adopted the last name Magnus Lawson. So I have cousins that are Zankly Lawson, Body Lawsons, Lance Lawsons. So all of that history, all of those lives intertwined into over 200 years, I think give me the foundation of who I am. And it affects my relationships with my son, with my husband, with my father. But at the core, that is my identity. And I flourish based on that fundamentally.
Yeah, that's beautiful that your name encapsulates all that lineage and history. I think I read somewhere that, you know, when you're thinking about your actions, you should always think about it like several generations before you and several generations after you, right? I think this really ties into you wanting to define and shape your own life, like through entrepreneurship.
Absolutely.
So what does resilience mean to you?
What does resilience mean to me? To me, resilience means never stopping. I am always on a path of growth. And, you know, I'm a big fan of hip hop. And there is this song by Big Sean, and the refrain is, keys open doors, but bricks open windows. And to me, it essentially means, listen, if a door doesn't work and your keys aren't working, pick up a brick and smash a window to keep moving. You never stay stagnant. You always go forward no matter what. And in that progression, that is life. That is you living your life and not necessarily staying in a milestone that you've achieved. You know? So that's, to me, resilience, just constant movement, progression.
Yeah, shout out to the venerable Big Sean, right?
Yeah, right? He put out a great album recently.
And so can you now give us a deeper overview of your life? And feel free to just, you know, like zone in on these different themes or elements where identity or entrepreneurship or resilience has manifested in your life. So maybe start off as like a kid and what happened then.
So major, I guess, milestones in my life, I think I would say started with my mother passing when I was 6. I am one of 5 children. I am the youngest. I am the only girl. So essentially, I was raised by 5 African men. I always say my 4 brothers and my dad raised me. And I think when you go through such a loss at such an early stage, it can either tear a family apart or bring them together. In my family, my brothers more specifically, they are my best friends. They were my bridesmaids when I got married.
Oh my gosh.
We definitely formed a clan. And I come from a very large Nigerian family. And despite my very thick American accent, the majority of them are still in London and in Nigeria, as we discussed earlier. Whenever there was an issue, whenever one of us did something bad, we had to take our lumps, not only from our dad and then each other, but then it would slowly travel to my cousins and my uncles and my aunts in London and in Nigeria. So if anything happened, you know, my dad would give me the punishment. My brothers would make fun of me for getting busted. And then this was the early 90s, right? So we didn't have, you know, Zoom and FaceTime and all that. So it would slowly trickle overseas. And it was 3 to 4 weeks of many people telling me, I heard about it. It's okay. It was a month long punishment and very grateful. But on the flip side, whenever I did something great, my successes, it traveled along the same pipeline. And because our family is so close and so big, I think it allowed me to block out a lot of the outside noise and not be so influenced by, I guess, what other people think of me.
Yeah.
I always had such a strong identity and strong connection to those people because they knew everything about us before we were even born. And I maintain that to this day.
Yeah, I can definitely relate in terms of also coming from a collectivism culture where, family and especially extended family, it's a double-edged sword where they're always in your life for good or for bad. They're all up in your business all the time. But the great thing too is they show up, and when you raise a hand, when you ask for help, everyone just kind of dog piles. And I think for me too, that has really, that's also contributed to my sense of resilience, knowing that I have this huge, family support structure to bolster me up, and all the symbols of really strong women, as I'm sure is also in your family, like very, very strong women.
Yes.
Has also helped shape my identity, but also given me examples of what resilience can look like.
Absolutely. They say you never really know who you are until you know where you came from. And having that direct link, it's so influential. I remember growing up during the summertime, a lot of my friends would go to camps, right? So they'd go kayaking and canoeing. I distinctly remember this one summer, I went to visit my uncle in Nigeria. He is 92 and he was a very well-known attorney, politician, and activist who fought against tribalism and was essentially, enemy number one of the Nigerian government at the time. And he was put into a political prison. So we visited him when he was in that political prison. And I remember him coming to get us out of the car. He and the guards ushered us into a room and they brought us tea. They brought him the New York Times, the London Times, the local Nigerian paper, and they just treated him with such respect and reverence. And because of our association to him, treated us with the same respect and reverence. And that is an early childhood memory that I had. So when you are directly confronted with your history, the blood that runs through your veins and what you're capable of, and what kind of challenges you think that you're encountering. I mean, they seem so small when you know what other people in your family have gone through.
I think it's so interesting that you got exposed to that history and lineage of power when you were younger. And for me, it was almost like I maybe knew 10% of my parents' life before they were my parents. It's like Stoic Asian parents don't really open up like that. It's actually funny that we're having this conversation now because I went back to Houston last weekend and I started formally interviewing my parents in Vietnamese and actually recording it to better understand, at least starting from my great grandparents. And it was really eye-opening to see both sides in terms of, like my great grandfather fought against like French colonialism, was executed, by them, to my grandmother as a single mom with 4 kids, but also raising like 10 other, because all the cousins, and so, all the cousins, and and then like people that I thought, I think you call everyone like a great aunt or like an aunt, and I was like, everyone's like an aunt or an uncle, and I was like, oh, like we're actually not blood relatives. You met when my grandma and you were in prison together, for trying to help, my oldest aunt and uncle like escape like out of the country. And so it's like, wow, now I feel like for me, I've always seen like strong women in my family and how they've interacted. And that's been a model for me, but I never truly understood the story and the legacy of that until like this past weekend.
I think because my mother passed when I was very young and my dad essentially had to take care of all of us being exposed to this was him just reaching out to his family for help.
Yeah.
We went to Nigeria every summer.
Yeah.
My dad would drop us off and then he would fly home and we would be there for 2 months.
Yeah.
He's like, I need time to myself. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So I think I'm not sure if it was purposeful.
Yeah.
That was essentially the result of him relying on the family to help get us all through this.
Yeah. And I think it's so amazing now that your actual startup is focused around family. So like full circle, but we'll get there in a little bit. So speaking about your childhood and your life until this point, were you always entrepreneurial, or were there moments, or your family, or were there moments when you realized like, oh, I think I'm an entrepreneur, or whatever that means to me?
So it's interesting. My father is also a physician and he's always had his own practice.
Yeah.
And the entrepreneurial nature was instilled in me. But I always thought, okay, as long as my husband works for himself, then we'll be okay.
Yeah.
And then of course, you make plans and God laughs. My
Yeah.
husband works for a great practice right now, and I was an oil and gas attorney, and I started to realize that maybe I can be the one to take the risk. So entrepreneurial endeavors, I guess I should say, it was something that I always, that was the goal for my household and not necessarily for me. After I had Ari, I swear, getting through that first year was just so rough. During that time, I enrolled at McCombs to get my MBA. I was 2 months postpartum. I was still working as a full-time attorney. I was working out, trying to get back to my regular physical self, and once I got over that hump, I just felt so powerful, I felt stronger, faster, smarter, like a woman. And I felt like the wool had been taken off, I didn't really understand the amount of commitment that it took to be a mom. And I just started looking at men like, step aside. You just can't do what I do right now. And I wasn't afraid anymore. I just wasn't afraid to do it.
I think it's so amazing that motherhood and your journey into motherhood was the catalyst for you to pursue entrepreneurship. Because I almost feel like there's a belief that motherhood is maybe not an impediment, but a delay into something around pursuing your own business. So I think it's so fascinating that for you, that was your like, oh, I'm actually a superwoman. I did that. Now I can do anything. And this is just the next thing that I'm pursuing.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree. And, when I speak to my friends, I say this all the time: your husband or your partner, they can't do what you do. And these are dynamic women that are VPs of Fortune 500 companies, and they keep a household, and their kids are respectful and smart. And it's just kind of amazing. And I don't know if it's our society or just global society as a whole, that somewhere along the lines, we were just taught that once you become a mother, that's it. But for me, like you said, that was the catalyst. That was my aha moment where
let's all
a lot more.
I also want to talk about this idea of women and especially women of color, and especially if you're also an immigrant, how maybe at a young age we have been taught or have picked up the ability to, you know, hyper emotionally compartmentalize challenges and struggles and just like focus on getting things done.
Yes.
And it's this idea of like, well, no one's around, let me just pick it up, let me take care of it, because who else is going to do it?
Yes.
And so how and because we've been trained at such a young age through society and like all these different factors, as a professional, I think that for me that's been a double-edged sword in terms of helping me be entrepreneurial and high functioning and do all these things, but also around this idea of putting so much pressure on myself, or like not having healthy boundaries and saying yes to everything. So I wanted to know about your experience, you know, especially as a mother, your entire career journey, and like now as a full-time entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Where do I even begin? I think because I was raised by men, there was a sense of arrogance. I'm going to have to be honest. I can and I will do anything I want or have to do in order to get things done. In business school, I think, I don't know why, but that was just like such a pivotal moment. I learned a lot about myself. I learned that when I get truly overwhelmed, I shut down and I close my eyes and I just go through it. You know, I just have to get through it. But in doing so, I would get stomach ulcers, right? And then like, wait a minute, where are these stomach ulcers coming from? I feel fine, but my body was telling me you are not fine. So just what you were saying, you know, we figure we just need to do whatever we need to do to get the job done. So I had to take a step back and listen to my body. You know, even though I feel like I can take on everything, it's okay to ask for help. In fact, you cannot do this alone. I think when I was an attorney, again, working in the oil and gas industry, a very male dominated field, a very white male dominated field, me showing up with my credentials was enough. Right. In their eyes, you know, this is, I guess, peak Dara. But again, me knowing where I came from and where people in my family, what they have accomplished, it was almost slightly insulting. I'm like, you
don't know.
You don't know. I can and will do, you know, I can do a lot more. And even though, you know, I've met some of the best people, it goes back to really knowing your identity and what you're capable of, because even those that are well-meaning will try and limit, you know, your potential. Not necessarily purposely, but it just is.
I think then almost identity and just self-awareness are really interlinked, right? Like identities as, you know, a woman, as a person of color, as an immigrant, as, you know, whatever one chooses to identify with, but also the self-awareness about, you know, not just the history of these elements, but also your capacity as well.
Absolutely.
Because I think something that I'm starting to learn in my professional career moving forward is, even if I have the capacity to do it, it doesn't mean I should say yes. You know? And so I'm glad that you brought up some of those health issues, because I think it's especially relevant for women, and how I've noticed. I mean, I think stress manifests like in your body for regardless of whether you're male or female or whatever you identify as. But I think for women, it tends to be a little bit more intense, or more obvious. So I'm glad that you shared that. So talking about your strengths, what do you think your superpower is. And that can be a technical or a soft skill or whatever you want to define it as.
Okay. What is my superpower? I tend to think that people speak in superlatives a little too much nowadays, like everything is iconic or, epic. I don't know if I have a superpower. I do think that I am a keen observer. Change does not scare me, and I move based on observations, right? I think I'm great at critical thinking, and I don't necessarily accept information as it's presented to me. I realize that there's always something deeper than what is in front of my face, right? So if this, then that. I am able to deduce or come to conclusions based on things that aren't said. Like, you said all this, but you didn't say this. Why is that? And I think that's really served me well. And again, just like growing and evolving and being curious about the things that aren't necessarily talked about,
Yeah. And I think that makes so much sense why your first career path was like an attorney. or that was part of, that critical, like, what else is there? What other data points is not being shared?
Yes.
I think related to that question, in terms of sharing and you processing information, what has been the best advice that someone has given you around life and or business?
Oh man. So my dad is a wealth of information.
Okay.
So a little bit of background information. Growing up in Houston, we grew up around a lot of athletes, right? I mean, and this was the height of the sports scene with the Houston Rockets and the Houston Oilers and the Astros. And for some reason, after 2 to 3 years, when this athlete's contract ended, they would have to move. And I was aware of this because I was friends with these athletes' children, right? We all lived in the same neighborhood. And I remember asking my dad, why do they have to move? They made so much money. It doesn't make any sense to me. Just because they're not playing anymore, I just don't get it. And he said to me, never count anybody's pockets. You don't know what they did to get there, and you don't know what they're doing to stay there. And it was this aha moment where you shouldn't look at what other people are doing as a basis for what you should be doing, because you don't have the full story. And I have applied that to every aspect of my life. I do not care where so-and-so is going on vacation. I don't care what kind of car they have or how much they're spending on their house. That's not going to help me pay my mortgage. That is, their fancy car isn't going to get me, my son, to school. And you do not know what they're doing to maintain that lifestyle. And it was just kind of a mind your own business and focus on you moment. And I think that has really served me well. I'm not influenced by people's opinion of me. But that doesn't mean that I'm not open to not positive, but beneficial criticism. Again, I'm always on a path of growth. And if somebody says something that, like, oh, that's a blind spot that I really didn't think of, I appreciate it and I learn from it and I grow from it. But just, not focusing on other people and what they're doing. If it inspires you, great. If it doesn't, stay in your lane.
Yeah, stay in your lane 2020. Right now, right. Beyond. But I think too, that's interesting, because I was listening to a podcast this morning and it was all around the idea of where do we pick up expectations, from our parents, society, all of these things. And even if even if our intent is this went really well, I want that. This didn't go so well, I never want that. We're still using others as a yardstick for
Yeah.
what success looks like for us.
Yes.
And I think it sounds like for you, tying it back to entrepreneurship, that is you defining your own definition of success.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And another thing that I just wanted to say that my
Yeah.
dad taught me, show me your friends and I'll tell you who you are.
Yeah.
I never want to be the smartest one in my group.
Yeah.
You always have to surround yourself by people who, I don't want to say are doing better than you, but are, that are giving you something to aspire to, right? In any arena, it doesn't necessarily have to be money or, jobs or whatever, but,
Yeah.
always surround yourself by people that you can grow from and don't be intimidated by it.
Yeah.
And I think that's very, very important, just who you surround yourself with.
Yeah. I think too that adage of you're the sum of the five people closest to you is so true. And I think that thinking from a college student watching this is I think the advice is surround yourself with the badasses like right now, right? And like be who you want to be and surround yourself with the people you want now instead of later. And I think it's funny because we're like just transitioning straight to the next question, um, what advice would you give to college age Dara? So like between 18 and 22-ish.
Okay. What advice would I give to college age Dara? From a personal level, I've always been very in tune with who I am. It was unshakable. So I would say personally, like keep that thought process. It'll serve you well. As it relates to my relationships with people outside of my family, respect and cultivate your female relationships. These girls will turn into powerful women, and the compassion that they show you, that's what's really going to help you evolve. Don't be so dismissive. And I would definitely say put a lot more effort into your female relationships because you'll be surprised at what a just unshakable support system you'll get as you get older.
Yeah. I think wholesome female friendships too has also been my big lesson around, college age Nina. And I think it's just a different dynamic in terms of just like I think men and women both have nurturing qualities that are society viewed as feminine, as well as like go-getter energy that society views as masculine. And that fluctuates, but it is, especially if you're pursuing something like entrepreneurship or motherhood or like just living life in general. In 2020, hello, I think having that community of just nurturing, supportive, strong women around you has also been, essential for my well-being and my growth as well.
I will say, so I'm 38, so I am on like the cusp of millennial, the millennial generation, and professionally, we were still kind of taught back then that there's really only enough room for one. So if there were multiple women in a field, then that's a competition. And it wasn't until I got to business school. I was, again, 2 months postpartum. I was the oldest female in the entire class, but I was confronted with some of the smartest, most supportive, loving young women that I have ever met in my life. There were days that I couldn't see past how I was going to get. I don't know how I was going to get past it. One breath at a time, 1 minute at a time. But these girls, I shouldn't call them girls, but they were just so much younger than me. The way they collectively and immediately like wrapped their arms around each other. I hadn't seen that before because that wasn't so prevalent when I was in school. And it was inspiring, honestly.
Yeah.
So freaking smart. I mean, just the
Yeah.
gunners in class, not afraid, telling the boys to step aside while also holding each other's hands,
Yeah.
reaching out to me to make sure that I was okay. None of them had kids, only one had a child.
Yeah.
But it was beautiful to see. And
Yeah.
it kind of like, okay, like the next generation, like they
They're
really got,
good.
they're gonna get
Yeah.
this right, and
Yeah.
that was a really great moment, honestly.
Yeah. I think too that's something that I'm super excited about the future.
Mhm.
Is I think was it like Gen X and kind of like half of Gen Z, whatever, however you want to dissect this, was really about, like you said, there was one seat at the table for a woman, like a token seat. And
Yeah.
so women were competition with other women. And
Yes.
now, kind of my millennial section is more about like the beginnings of, hey, like how many more chairs can we bring to the table for other women
Yeah.
because of their talent, because they're deserving. And I think that, most Gen Z, which I think are assuming college students now, they're past that. Like they're not even like, oh yeah, we're competing. It's I think this idea of like lifting each other up has been in, that's all they've known, right?
Yes.
There wasn't any transitional period. And so I'm so excited to see what the future of the business world and society and like especially like entrepreneurship will look like with that mentality moving
Oh
forward.
yeah. And they have the confidence. Not only are we going to bring, new seats to the table, we're going to completely reimagine this as
Yeah.
it should be. So and so, like, this isn't the direction we're going in. So we need to replace you. I mean, it's just really the confidence,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
vocal. They will not stand for anything else. It's
Yeah.
really gratifying and
I
inspirational to see.
I think I read an article a couple years ago where it talked about, millennials and our generation are, we're like the Sims. We recreate what we already know in a different context.
Hmm.
Whereas, Gen Z, they're like the Minecraft, they're world builders where they start from scratch and they re-envision new systems and structures. And it's not a recreation of something, it is a creation of something new.
I love that. That is a great
Yeah.
analogy.
Yeah. And so I'm again like the world's pretty bleak right now, but I'm super excited to see what students, how students move forward,
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
this moment on. And I think something like the year 2020 has been such a, I forgot what the term, it was kind of like my 9/11, where it was such a huge catastrophic, cataclysmic moment in history that is, whether we're consciously thinking of it or not, is kind of built into our psyche. And a lot of decisions are affected by that. And I'm hoping that with these future entrepreneurs, with these future, whatever they want to do, that, it'll just be better. Like, you know,
I believe it. I believe it. I
yeah,
believe the desire is there. I believe the intellect is there. The numbers are there.
yeah,
It gives me hope. It really does.
yeah,
There was you talk about a cataclysmic event. There's a book that I wouldn't recommend, but it was just a very interesting perspective called The Power.
yeah,
And it speaks about, before the event and after the event. And
yeah,
before the event, I can't remember how, but there was this electrical current that shot out like electricity, and it only was possessed by women, right? And they started to use that force to kind of reimagine the world as they wanted
yeah,
it. And there was like this huge world war, and the world like came to an end. And
yeah,
it picked up like 100 or so years after that cataclysmic event. And the way they were referring to women, they're like, can you believe that women were considered like second class citizens? Like, how
yeah,
it all
yeah,
seems ridiculous. And
yeah,
because, essentially everything had to blow up and be remade, it just
yeah,
sounded like history,
Yeah.
I can't
It
believe.
sounds, yeah, I think it sounds like this moment where I feel like, again, all of these masculine associated, like go, 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 like capitalism over everything, like all, like, like power, not community, right? Like,
Mhm.
um, it's this moment for the world to almost shift and for these attributes that historically have been assigned to women around nurturing, thinking about the community, social impact, social entrepreneurship, caring for others.
Mhm.
I think it's almost like that book you said, like this is a moment where things break down, hopefully, and build back up in a much more holistic and whole and nurturing, compassionate way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My son, he's a rough and tumble boy. And then he's very competitive. And whenever he does something great, in the beginning, he would say, I'm so strong. I'm a big boy. I'm like, yes, and you're also so
Yeah.
kind and
Yeah.
loving, and just like instilling that stuff. And so now
Yeah.
he's like, Mommy, I'm so kind. And
Oh my gosh.
yeah, I mean, and it's
It's
just
Ari's 4, right?
Ari's 4. Yes.
Okay.
hmm
Yeah.
and my husband does the same thing too. He's like, "You're so
Yeah.
thoughtful," and he's like, "Yeah, I really care about."
That's so cute.
But that just
Yeah.
really isn't something that
Yeah.
I think a lot of people thought, or mothers, I would say, thought about if they had boys. Like boys will be boys, but no, you
Yeah.
teach them how to respect women and how to think about how they
Yeah.
should be viewed. My son is very big, and he loves to play and chase his friends. And one of his best friends was like, Ari, stop, she's a girl.
Yeah.
And he was just getting really aggressive. And I was like, all
Yeah.
right, you have to stop and think that you're bigger than your friends. And even though you're excited and playing, like she
Yeah.
may feel like she needs some space. And it's okay for you to give them space and make sure she's
Yeah.
okay. And then you guys can completely play again. And he's like, oh, okay. And, they just get it, and
Yeah.
kind of like you're saying, stop separating like the masculine and the feminine.
Competitive versus
Yeah,
competition and ambition versus nurturing and compassion, like those can be interrelated. It's
absolutely.
not a either or,
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah. And I think that's what's so exciting about this surge of just more women in entrepreneurship is now there's more integration of these elements, right? Like you can be ambitious and you can still think about, you can have an ROI and you can still be, serving mothers, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
With the business that you're creating.
Yeah.
Um, and so, do you want to go a little bit more into your actual company and what it does? Because I think now that we have a good understanding of your identity, it makes total sense why you're working on this startup, right?
Yeah. So NwaBebé is essentially a baby product company, and we want to elevate infant essentials to consider the user, i.e., the mother or the caretaker, as
Yeah.
well as address infant concerns. One of the catalysts, I guess I should say, was when I had Ari. I don't know if this is too graphic, but I had to have an emergency C-section.
Yeah.
And, there were all of these machines and innovations and techniques that were used in order to save him.
Yeah.
I had a cough before I checked in. And every time I coughed, I felt like my sutures would bust open. I was essentially gutted
Yeah.
like a fish. And when I told this to the nurse, she handed me a pillow and said, every time you cough, just cover your C-section. And that was it. And I was like, am I not a factor in this? Like, this is all you have.
Yeah. Am I like the 1800s? My son's like the 21st century.
Like there's
Yeah.
millions of dollars of equipment,
Yeah.
that was focused solely on the baby. But when it came to me, I was
As
just
a
completely
mother.
disregarded.
Yeah.
Another example is the whole breast is best campaign. Um, Breastfeeding is there's so many variables.
Yeah.
that's needed to like facilitate this response, right? So by all intents and purposes, I had a successful, infant feeding journey. My son didn't have latching issues. I didn't have milk supply issues, but the time, effort, and money that I had to put forth in making this happen wasn't discussed. I had two $300 breast pumps. I had to take 30 to 45-minute pumping breaks every 2 hours when I was at work. I had to plead with HR to put a refrigerator in the break room so I can store my milk. I mean, this is a lot of time and expense in order to
it's like 5 to 7 hours a day feeding.
That is just the baby feeding. That doesn't me like sterilizing the bottles, getting the bottle ready. I mean, it is all encompassing. It's a full-time job. But what I learned, so my mother-in-law is a neonatologist, which means she is the physician for NICU babies. And she was telling me about WIC. WIC is a food assistance program for mothers and children. And there are various food packages, right? So in order to encourage breastfeeding, if you breastfeed your child, or if you provide like an exclusive diet of breast milk, you get this big, beautiful food package for you and your other children, like eggs and milk and all this other stuff. And if you partially feed, then it's reduced. And if you don't feed, I don't even know what that package looks like. But tying somebody's ability to breastfeed when it's such a difficult process already to their ability to care for their family is so offensive and disrespectful to mothers as a whole. It's a slap in the face, you know? And I feel as if baby products and policies that are in place, they don't respect today's version of motherhood. Stay-at-home moms, they don't just stay at home. They have many other things that they're juggling, right? They have a busy lifestyle, a household to run, other things that
a startup they're working on, like
21st
century mom. Right?
Exactly, the 21st century mom. And my co-founder and I, we saw just a huge white space, a lot of white space in products that addressed who we were as new parents. Also, our husbands are so supportive and they wanted to get in there. Fathers nowadays, millennial fathers, they spend more time with their children than any other male generation in history. And the fact that, nobody's really considering bringing them into like their early childhood, I guess, relationship, it felt wrong. I mentioned my co-founder. She is a chemical engineering professor at the University of Texas. And we were around the same age when we gave birth. She traveled a lot, giving speeches on behalf of like scientific panels. She had twins during this time.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
Twins.
Twins,
were in the NICU. So she was separated from them for over 80 days. And she had to maximize each and every moment she had while she was visiting them. And, she still, on a much greater scale than I did, she felt the pain of not having tools that kind of helped her multitask, as a busy professional, as a mother, that helped her maintain that connection while helping her juggle the other demanding responsibilities in her life. So NwaBebé was born from that. When you have a child, you realize that the baby bottle is probably the most ubiquitous product. I had that in my hand more than my own phone. When you realize the time commitment associated with it, you realize that there is so much more that can be done during this time. Going back to just our backgrounds as immigrants, my co-founder is from the Dominican Republic.
Yeah.
And we are such steadfast believers in education in all forms. And parents being involved as early as possible, realizing that babies aren't just beings that are sitting there waiting. They are brilliant. The brain doubles in size between 0 and 1 years old. And by the time they are 3, 80% of the adult neural connections are made. So it's a prime time to teach them about their environment and to do it without the use of additional electronics in time that you don't really have to begin with.
Yeah. And it's so amazing that all these themes of your resilient journey in the early stages of becoming a mother, and your multiple identities, and how this has led you to launch a startup around all these themes, right? So I would say, last 2 questions. First one is, what is your one piece of advice for aspiring young entrepreneurs, especially if they happen to be a woman or a woman of color or an immigrant?
You cannot do it alone. That is my one. I mean, there's a lot of advice, but first and foremost, find your village and lean into it.
Yeah.
You can't do it alone.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And then last question is, how can people follow you or support you on your entrepreneur journey?
So you can find me on LinkedIn, Dara Chike-Obi. You can email me at dara@NwaBebé.com. We are preparing for our pre-seed round. We are really excited about getting our prototype to market and really testing the product market fit. So if anybody has, I guess, experience in marketing on a smaller scale, as well as just manufacturing, we'll take it. I'll take any advice. I will say that's one of the great things about being a female entrepreneur in Austin. This ecosystem, there have been so many experts, male, female, Black, white, who have given their time so freely to make sure that this is a success. So if this connects with you, I'd just love to talk to you.
Yeah, for sure. And if you want an introduction to Dara, you can also email me or follow up with me, and I can make that connection as well. So we're gonna wrap up this recorded session. Dara, any last thoughts that you want to share with these female students at UT?
Yes. When I was working, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I didn't want to be in the place that I was in, and I didn't know where to start. So I just attended a demo day. That was my very first introduction into the startup ecosphere. So if you don't know where to go, what to do, use the university resources. The way you guys are tapped into Techstars and Mass Challenge. I mean, it's really brought me close to people who genuinely support what we do. Just go. Don't be afraid. Just go. Google next event and attend it. You'll start to get the juices flowing.